Hello, my name is Chris Rutherford. I've been an entrepreneur, a business owner for about 4 years now. My mainline business is in book publishing through service companies and different book publishers. But I started this journey as an entrepreneur, as a business owner about 4 years ago when I started my first company. Fast forward to today, we have a couple hundred workers. We have offices up and down the East Coast, an office out in the Philippines, and an office up in Toronto. We are one of the largest book publishers as far as new titles to market, but this all didn't happen overnight. Kind of want to give you a little bit of a backstory before we get into this, but over the course of the last 4 years, I've really learned 3 points or 3 opportunities that happened to me that I can point to when I can say that when I made this decision, my life changed at that point for the better. I grew as a person, I grew as a business owner, I grew as a leader in some fashion. But again, I want to give you kind of a background before I get into that. I came from San Diego. I moved here about 9 years ago from San Diego. I worked for a family-owned book publisher out here. I worked for them for about 4 to 5 years. Within that, I was a business development officer for them. And so a couple years within working for him, the owner wanted to open up a shop overseas in the Philippines. That's where one of our major competitors were, and that's where everybody seemed to be outsourcing at the time. So I was the guy, as a business development officer, I was the guy that went over to the Philippines to open it up. Now, I went over there thinking I was going to be over there for 2 months. You know, easy. I know how to set something up, get somebody in charge, get it run, come back home. Well, that wasn't the case. I was over there for about 8 months, and really what had happened was when I went over there, I kind of lost touch with the company here in the US. For whatever reason, they kind of abandoned the idea or mentally checked out. And so I was left to figure a lot of this stuff out for myself. Well, during those 8 months, it was probably, I can actually state, it was the hardest time for me personally. Horrible time personally. But as a business person, and as, you know, again, for what I do today, it was something that allowed me to grow tremendously as a business person. And so forever, I'll be grateful for the opportunity that I had to do that. Over there 8 months, set up shop. We had about 100 workers. And I came back home, and a couple months later, I was fired. The guy started just kind of chopping from the top once he had that set up. And so that was me. And if anybody's ever lost their job, been downsized, cutbacks, anything along those lines, you know the feeling. You know, I was hurting to my stomach, sleepless nights, trying to figure out, you know, how I was going to keep a roof over my head, how I was going to, you know, pay for my 2 girls, and basically live life. And so I started scrambling at that point. Well, right at that time too, I had just started the MBA program at University of Oklahoma. And during orientation, we're sitting there and they introduced this guy, Eddie Edwards, which is the director of the MBA program there at OU. And they introduced Eddie, and he's a guy who's influential in building Oklahoma City, knows every businessman that there is in Oklahoma City. And Eddie gets up and says he has an open door policy. Well, I just lost my job, went from a 6-figure income to 0. And we all know how, again, if you've ever been in that situation, you know internally what that feels like. And so I call up Eddie and I tell him, hey, you know, I would love to have a meeting with you. And so he asked me to meet him at Panera for lunch. Now, I was going into this meeting, I was going to try to play it cool, but I knew I was going to ask him for a job, and I figured I was just going to wow him. And at the end of that lunch meeting, he was going to open up his Rolodex and call 10 people and try to get me a job. Well, I went into that meeting, and it was the first time that somebody in a while has invested in me from a business standpoint. Started asking all kinds of questions on who I was, what I had done in the past, what my experience was, what I really wanted out of life, what my family situation was. And at the end of that lunch meeting, came out of there and he said, hey, Chris, it looks like, you know, you have a ton of different resources at your fingertips from what you just came out of. It seems like the industry that you're in or that you were in looks like everybody's going over there, but nobody has the wherewithal or the know-how to go over there and start it up for themselves. So instead of you trying to call these publishing houses and try to work for them, why don't you set up your own business and contract out with these publishers to be their service provider? And it wasn't until that point when that light actually flipped for me. The switch turned on, I should say. And I went into that meeting, looking to be an employee. I was looking for a job. I wanted somebody to pay me. I wanted a steady salary. But I came out of that meeting, and for the first time, knowing that I wanted to be an employer. I wanted to run my own shop. I wanted my own business, and I wanted to be able to call the shots. And so, the first point that I'd like to make, first lesson that I learned over the last 4 years was, you really have to be able to flip that switch as an employer versus an employee. As an employer, you do things differently. You have people looking to you. Whatever it is that you do, they're mimicking. You come in late, it's okay for them to come in late. You make excuses, it's okay for them to make excuses. So you really got to be able to flip that switch, and you got to get over a lot of hurdles, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. You got to make sure the lights are on. You got to make sure salaries are paid. You got to make sure, benefits are given, and so forth. And to be able to, mentally switch, mentally change, I draw a lot of that from just fascinated with the Navy SEALs. Anything that I can read, any kind of videos that I can watch, I watch on the Navy SEALs, because they have a really great ability to take these soldiers and teach them how to flip the switch. And one of the things kind of their understanding is that when your mind tells you that you're tired, or your mind tells you to quit, your body really has another 40 to 50% in the reserve. So when it's 5 o'clock and you're tired, and your mind's telling you, hey dude, go home, take a nap, eat dinner, relax, watch TV, your body literally still has 50% left that it can do in the day. And now I'm not telling you to work 24 hours a day, but I'm telling you, if you want to do something different in life, if you want to be something more, you got to be something more than a 9 to 5. So at 5 o'clock when everybody's going home, you got to be able to flip that switch, turn that mindset on, make a couple more calls, take a couple more meetings, listen to a couple more pitches, and just think of what you can do if you do that. You do that every day, you're doing something more than the ordinary. You're doing something more. You're going to be better than that. And so, when you're a business owner, you're going to get punched in the face on a daily basis. When I started my business, my life wasn't perfect. It wasn't like, I woke up that morning and the clouds parted and the sun came down and a guy showed up at the door with a briefcase saying, hey, we're handing out Chris Rutherford grants today. Don't worry, you don't have to pay it back. And by the way, we have a whole IT staff here to build your website, create your infrastructure. It doesn't happen like that. You got to make things happen. You got to do things on your own. When I started my business, I was recently divorced. So I was going through all the pain and the anxiety and the hurt and everything that comes along with that. I was trying to figure out how to pay alimony, trying to figure out how to pay child support, going through, just enrolled at the OU program, so tuition. I had to keep a roof over my head. I had to keep gas in my tank. I had to keep food on the table. I had to figure out how to be a dad, a single dad, half the time, in that situation. I came from a hostile work environment where my ex-employer wasn't saying great things about me, here in where I live, but also professionally. I started a company overseas. And so it's the battle of being able to navigate that process. And when I got over there, literally money in the bank, everything set up, everything ready to go, the world's largest tsunami hit. And so I'm sitting there at the Marriott and I'm watching cars, float by me on the street, sheds and houses float down the street. And I was like, everybody died. This is over. This is it, for a split second. But as I said, as an employer, you got to flip that switch. You got to have a different mindset. And so my mindset was, look, man, at some point, this is going to stop. The skies will part. The roads will clear. What am I going to do? And who am I going to be moving forward? And, what did we do? We showed up at work as soon as the roads were cleared, and everybody showed up there. Everybody showed up to work. And we haven't looked back since. And so it's being able to have that mindset of not giving up, going that extra mile, being stronger. When my mind initially told me to quit, moving past that and moving forward. And so, these last 4 years literally is you got to be able to change your mindset. You got to be able to flip your switch. And the second lesson I learned, I call buying my ticket. As I said, I left that lunch with Mr. Edwards. I was an employer now. I had my own business. At least in my head, I had my own business. I just needed to go out there and find business to be able to create revenue. And so what I did is I started calling all the publishers I knew. I'd go to Barnes & Noble and I'd look at the spines of books, and if it was a publisher that I hadn't heard of, I'd look them up and I'd call them. And so I started this process, which is a sales cycle. You're talking about you're starting from scratch and trying to create something out of it. And so 6 months, or not 6 months, 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, I'm just getting nowhere. I'm on the phone daily, I'm on the internet daily. There's not a minute that I'm wasting during the day doing this, and I'm hitting brick wall after brick wall after brick wall. Well, I finally got through to a publisher out in New York, and I got through to their vice president. Gave him my little spiel of what I do or what I thought I can do. And he said, well, let me pitch it to the president. I'll get back to you. So I called him on Friday. He said, hey, look, we talked to the president. We're interested, but we're busy today. Call us Monday. So I called Monday, Monday called Wednesday, Wednesday called Friday, Friday called Wednesday, Wednesday called Monday. Did this for about 6 weeks. Well, what I later found out was that the receptionist felt so bad that I kept calling in and they kept putting me off, that the next time I called in, she put me through to the president's phone directly. And so he answered the phone, and I told him who I was, and I could just feel the air, let out of his lungs. And you can tell when somebody doesn't want to talk to you, and they're just kind of giving you the mercy time, I guess, or the mercy phone call there. But I took that opportunity, and I at least had him on the phone, so I wasn't just going to say, okay, thank you, and hang up. I just kind of started small talking him. I knew what his pain points were. I knew the industry. I knew what he was probably up against on a day-to-day, and I made that work to my benefit in a casual conversation with him. And so we're on the phone for about an hour and a half. And he said, hey, look, I'm interested. Why don't you give me a call tomorrow? Here was my cell phone. Give me a call tomorrow. Well, tomorrow was a Saturday, so I'm now on the phone with the president. The president wants me to give him a call on Saturday. I'm thinking, look, I got this. This is a done deal. We'll be making money in no time. So I call him on Saturday. We talked for about another hour and a half. And at the end of the phone call, he said, hey, look, Chris, this is great, but I'm in New York. You're in Oklahoma. I don't know how this is going to work. If you're ever in the area, look me up. And at that point, I knew, what I had was important to me. It was life-changing to me, but it wasn't life-changing to him. And so I knew I had to kind of take that opportunity that I had. And again, this is the first guy I've actually had on the phone in the last 3 to 4 months. And so this was my opportunity. This is my chance to make something happen. And so I said, hey, look, if I buy a ticket out to New York tomorrow, will you have a meeting with me? And, at that point, he flipped. And, I was showing him that, hey, look, I wasn't here looking for a handout. I believe in what I'm selling. I believe in myself. And, he told me, hey, look, if you fly out to New York, if you're going to take it upon yourself on your dime to fly out to New York, I will absolutely meet with you, and I'll put you up in a hotel, and I'll buy you a steak dinner. So I said, great, I'll be there tomorrow. It wasn't tomorrow, it was about a week later, but I went out there, met with him. We had a great day, and at the end of that steak dinner, we shook hands, and we were partners in the new venture. I was off to the Philippines a week later to start that first business. Now, that was my opportunity. That was my chance to make something happen. And again, that's my buying the ticket moment. Now, I'd be lying to you if I told you that I don't have sleepless nights. I absolutely have sleepless nights. I wake up in cold sweats thinking, what would have happened if I didn't take that opportunity? It's so easy to say, okay, thank you for your time, hang up the phone. It's so easy to make excuses. It's so easy, to take the easy road out. And that's why it's the easy road. It's hard to take a chance. It's hard to make a leap of faith. It's hard to, really believe in yourself and speak it to where it comes true and you make it happen. And so what, the second lesson that I learned is that buying the ticket, taking the opportunity. Again, somebody wants to pitch to me from the mailroom on how they can make the mailroom better. I'm absolutely listening. Somebody wants to tell me how the CRM or how it can be more functional or how we can answer the phones better. I'm absolutely listening. Somebody wants to pitch me on a new business idea or an investment opportunity. I'm absolutely listening, because I'm scared to death that I'm going to miss my next opportunity. I'm scared to death that I'm not going to buy my second ticket. And so I'm listening to everything that comes my way. So that's the second lesson I learned is, you really got to seek that opportunity. You got to buy your ticket. Now, the third lesson I call crawling towards the bear. And this refers to my dad. My dad was an avid outdoorsman, hunting, fishing. He'd set up his business conferences. He'd set up his meetings, around the country based upon, what season it was where. I have pictures of him, and he's releasing falcons, out into the wild. He'd send me a text message on a Tuesday, and he's floating down the Oregon River catching salmon. Each year, he would go on these elk hunts, and he'd go to Idaho, Wyoming, wherever elk are. And I'm not talking about like he'd stay at some bougie hotel, and they'd drive him up to the stand, and it was a heated stand, and they'd cater in lunch, and then he'd shoot an elk, and they'd cut it up and ship it back home. I'm talking he'd go off grid. He'd go about 100 miles off grid, stay in some cabin. They'd take horses up to the top of the mountain so the horses couldn't go any further, and then they'd get off and they'd hike to the top of the mountain, start glassing the area, figure out where the elk were, where they were going to go set up. And it was during one of these hunts, and he's got his back up against a tree, and the guide's sitting about 150 feet away from him, calling for elk. And all of a sudden, a bear pops up into their area, pops up into their little hunting area. And the guide's sitting there looking at him like, do you see that bear? Do you see that bear? My dad says, yeah, I see it. And, my dad turns around, I guess the wind's at his face, so it's blowing away from the bear. Bear can't smell him. And my dad starts crawling towards the bear. And so he's telling me this story. They're back at the hunting lodge, and the guide is telling the rest of the group this story. And the guide's sitting there saying, hey, look, man, I've been a guide for 25 years. Anytime a bear pops up into our hunting area, our scene, I have to wrestle guys down because they're jumping up and they're running the opposite way. He's like, you spook a bear, bad things can happen. And he goes, but in 25 years, I've never, ever, ever seen somebody turn around and crawl towards the bear. What the heck were you thinking? And my dad's simple response was, I wanted to see how close to the bear I could get. And so we think about that, and what does this have to do with business? You take the analogy of the bear, and you make the bear a dream or a goal. How many times do people, once they realize their dream or their goal, do they take off and they run the other way? How many times does somebody, set a goal or set a dream and never take a step forward? They just start backpedaling. You think about New Year's Eve and the new year every year. The new year hits, everybody's starting a new workout program. That morning comes, they hit snooze. It's time to get up to work, and we're going to start this tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes tomorrow. How many people are so scared to even verbalize their dream for fear that somebody's actually going to hold them accountable for it? And so when I talk about business, you have to have goals. You have to have dreams. It doesn't matter if you're the business owner, if you're a top-level manager, if you're a manager, if you're an associate, if you're an employee, if you're the stock room. You have to have goals. You have to have dreams. And you have to start moving forward to them. You got to take that first step. And if your goal, if your dream is not the biggest, ugliest, snarliest bear in the world, your goal, your dream it's not big enough in my standards. And so you might have these little bear cubs along the way, these little dreams along the way that you have to crawl towards and you have to hit to get to that big one. But you have to have them, and you have to start that process of moving forward. Now, I'm a book publisher, so this sounds cheesy, but I tell everybody that, look, when you're dead, when you're gone, you're going to leave a legacy. It's going to be good, it's going to be bad, it's going to be something, but you're going to leave a legacy. So if someone were to write a book about you when you're dead, when you're gone, how thick, how interesting is that book going to be? And that's how I want to live my life. I want the thickest, most interesting story after accomplishment after adversity, overcoming adversity that it can possibly be. And so that's what I leave you guys with here today. It's Entrepreneurship Conference. You guys are all entrepreneurs, business leaders, employees seeking to be, but you have to set goals. If you have courage enough to speak it, if you can see it and believe in yourself and you have courage enough to speak it, great things are going to happen to you. So again, I thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it. This is a great conference, a bunch of great speakers coming up today. But again, set goals, walk to achieve them. And again, the 3 lessons I learned, you got to flip that switch. You got to change your mindset. You got to buy your ticket. You got to chase your bear. Thank you very much. My name is Chris Rutherford. I appreciate your time.